we have a whole chapter dedicated to a bad person, the story of King Vena. We heard yesterday about Anga, who is in a line of kings coming from whom? Coming from Dhruva. To see if you're awake. Checking from Dhruva, so many generations of kings coming to Anga, and Anga was a good king. He married a woman who was, of all things, the daughter of death personified, and wasn't a good consequence. The consequence was a bad son was born, and he was so bad that Anga had to leave. He couldn't reform his son, and he left. So now we're beginning chapter 14, where the sages, headed by Bhrigu. So Bhrigu he's way up there. He's one of the Saptarishis, one of the 7 principal rishis born directly from Lord Brahma. So the sages, because King Anga was in charge of the whole planet, and there was no king, and they're concerned with the welfare of the planet. Certainly the human population, because the human population has a very important role to play in what the experience of the other living entities on the planet is. And so the sages, took permission from Anga's wife, the queen, the daughter of death personified, Sunita was her name. And with her permission, they installed Vena as the king. And they had regrets. It was already known that Vena was very severe and cruel. Now their concern was the thieves and rogues would take over. So the thieves and rogues hid out. The comparison is like rats hide when snakes come around. So the thieves and rogues problem was solved, but then the wicked king problem wasn't solved. When he assumed the throne of the king, he became very proud. Pride. Pride is a big item in advancing in spiritual life. According to Raghunath Das Goswami, it's the first order of business, is to become free from pride. And it's easier said than done because it's very stubborn. Pride is directly connected to the bodily conception. From I am this body comes the conception of what is mine. And what is mine is what comes from the body. And when one has mine, then one becomes proud of what is mine. And of course, the opposite emotion can be there. I don't have enough. But whatever it is that one has, one is proud of, and pride arises from that bodily conception. It's very strong. How to get on the other side of pride, you have to go beyond the bodily conception. And if you go beyond the bodily conception, pride dissolves. Say it the other way. As long as there's a strain, a degree of bodily conception, which for most of us is more than a degree, there's pride. And when one gets some recognition, then pride inflames. So here's Vena, who's cruel, And he's put in the position of king of the world. So his pride just ballooned like anything. And when his pride went up, he then considered himself greater than anyone. And in that prideful condition, he began to insult people, anybody, left and right. And it didn't stop with horizontal, it went vertical, greater personalities than him, and the demigods and the Supreme Lord. He became the Supreme Lord as far as he was concerned. So he got on his chariot, traveled around his kingdom, terrifying people. And those who were above him, the Brahmanas, were forbidden to do their Brahminical duties. And their Brahminical duties, we're going to get a picture here of that section of the Vedas that deals with karma kunda. It's in the context of a story. Karma, what does karma kanda means? It's a portion of the vast portion of the Vedas, 90-something% of the Vedas, deals with procedures for those who wish to achieve something of this world. There's procedures where they can propitiate devas that dispense stuff, and they worship this deva and that devi and so forth to get all the stuff they want. And it's a Vedic process. No, there's certainly passion because one does something to get something, but there's also, because they're recognizing those who are actual controllers of the universe, there's a mode of goodness feature. It elevates people through the mode of goodness while they're satisfying their passion. That's the purpose. And there's a lot of people that have passion, and there's very few people that want goodness to go along with that passion. But there's some people, and at least a model, a very strong Vedic model, which is what's in this chapter, is demigod worship or karma kanda rituals where devas are propitiated, and those who are capable of doing that by their study of the Vedas, etc., it's the Brahmanas. Here's a detail, a detail that I like. When when Vyasadeva, towards the end of Dwapara Yuga, Vyasadeva looked forward in time and saw Kali Yuga coming, and it was, yikes, look at Kali Yuga, I got to do something because it gets really bad. So one of the major contributions that Vyasadeva made was he took the Vedas, which were present in the form of sound, and he put it in a written form. And when he put it in a written form, he divided the Vedas into 4. And here's what Jiva Goswami describes. In previous ages, the sages, they knew which mantras from the Vedas to use for different purposes. So when person X went to certain Brahmana, and I would like such and such, can you perform a yajna for me so I can achieve such and such? He knew exactly what mantras. But in Kali Yuga, people don't know the mantras as well as they did in previous ages. So what Vyasadeva did was he divided them into 4 divisions that indicate different things without going into what all that is. Jiva Goswami explains, it was like in the king's treasury, there's so many jewels. And the Brahmanas knew which of those jewels was needed for the different desires of living entities. But in Kali Yuga, people don't have that discernment capacity. And so he put the rubies over here, the diamonds over there, the emeralds over there, and the miscellaneous over there. So it was easier for the Brahmanas to select the mantras according to the desires of the big entities. It's the same set of mantras. He just divided it according to purposes. That's Jiva Goswami's explanation of what Vyasadeva did. Now, this is not Kali Yuga. It's a previous age. It's Satya Yuga. And people are engaged in having material desires, but they go to the brahmanas to fulfill those desires. And this is important. When the mantras are properly executed, at the very beginning of every yajna, there's the bhokta of the yajna that's pronounced. The bhokta of the yajna means who's the enjoyer of this sacrifice. And who's the enjoyer of all sacrifices from Bhagavad Gita? It's Krishna. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam, right? 529 Bhagavad Gita. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. I am the enjoyer of all yagyas. I'm the bhokta of all yagyas. So Vishnu is propitiated first. And then other mantras say other things. This is the sankalpa. This is the aspiration of the individual. This is the deva or devi that's being propitiated to get the thing that this individual wants. And then there's prayers to Ganesh, please remove obstacles so this fellow can get what he wants. And then so many mantras saying so many things and oblations into the fire. Now remember, Anga was like an anxiety because the devas weren't coming. And they weren't accepting the offerings. And he was told the reason is you don't have a son. So here's how you can get a son. So he got a son, and the son was a bad guy. Now that son is the king. And the son told the brahmanas, stop all yajnas. Why? Give everything to me. Because I'm the supreme person. So you don't need to go to these demigods. Who are they anyways? You just give stuff to me. Make all sacrifices unto me because I'm the supreme. This fellow was really puffed up. And therefore, all the great sages assembled together and, after observing cruel Venus atrocities, concluded that a great danger and catastrophe was approaching the people of the world. Thus, out of compassion, they began to talk among themselves, for they themselves were the performers of the sacrifices. They couldn't do their duty according to the king. And they knew that would have its consequences, not just for them, but for people in general. And that was a big problem. So they began to consider what to do. There's a metaphor that's used in this section. It's a metaphor where there's a log that has ants in the middle of the log, and there's a fire burning on this end, and there's a fire burning on that end. And that was like having Venus, the king, and they were the ants, the people. Because over here, it's the rogues and thieves, so they put him as king, but over there is the necessity of mankind are being denied. And honoring the Supreme Lord is being denied because he's saying he's the Supreme Lord. So that's a big problem, what to do. They began to consider how people could be happy. Because the higher purpose of these karma kanda rituals is to elevate people through the mode of passion to the mode of goodness into the realm of transcendence. That's the purpose. Most people stop at just fulfilling their desires. And they say, according to Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, Krishna says that they say, and it's true, that that's all there is fulfilling desires through dharma and going to heaven afterwards. And there's nothing more. Try it sometime. Ask some people that are not part of Vedic culture and ask them what they understand the purpose of religion is. I've done it. Or say it this way. The purpose of religion, say, is it true or false? The purpose of religion is live piously according to the codes of Dharma, so that you can be a good person. And by being a good person, living according to the codes of Dharma, you will prosper in this life. And after this life, you go to heaven. Is that the purpose of Dharma? Largely, the audience or the persons will concur. Be pious, live properly, prosper because you're living properly. And after this life, you go to heaven. According to what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, most people think there's nothing more than this. And therefore, a big part of the Vedas is exactly that. But he stopped it, saying, give it to me. So what to do? We appointed this Vena king of the state in order to give protection to the citizens. That's the rogues and thieves part. But now he has become the enemy of the citizens. Despite all these discrepancies, we should try at once to pacify him. So the sages had a sages conference, and they went to the king, and they appealed to the king in various ways. And in those various ways, they spoke. First, they considered carefully how to speak to him. And they concealed their anger, and they spoke nice words. And they explained to him, I'm not going to read the whole section, but they explained to him the mission of life from a karma kanda perspective. And don't deny people the opportunity to receive their necessities. You approach the demigods and propitiate the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and people will have their necessities and everything will be nice, and you'll be a good king. And Vena heard them, and he insulted them. You are not at all experienced. It is very much regrettable that you are maintaining something which is not religious and are accepting it as religion. Indeed, I think you are giving up your real husband who maintains you, that's him, and are searching after some paramour to worship. Those who out of gross ignorance do not worship the king, who is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, experience happiness neither in this world nor in the world after death. So turn the dial and stop those Vedic sacrifices, karma kanda rituals, satisfying the Supreme Lord and the devas, and satisfy me. And then you'll get everything you want, this life and after this life. You are so much devoted to the demigods, but who are they? Indeed, your affection for these demigods is exactly like the affection of an unchaste woman who neglects her married life and gives all attention to her paramour. And he gives a long list starting with Lord Vishnu. We're at text 27. And all these other people, and all others who are great and competent to bestow benedictions or to curse, all abide in the body of the king. For this reason, the king is known as the reservoir of all demigods, or simply parts and parcels of the king's body. Then he says, stop being envious of me, and you should worship me and offer me all paraphernalia. So the sages went back to having another sage conference, what to do. Didn't work. We tried. He not only insulted us, he insulted the demigods, he insulted Lord Vishnu. And so that's the burning fire where it's burning on that end, as well as the rogue and thieves end. All the great saintly sages immediately cried, kill him, kill him. But sages, we don't kill people. We're sages, we don't kill people. But he's dared to even insult Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And who could do this? What to do? They went back to their hermitages and performing their daily duties. They started to speak again. First, speaking about the personality of Godhead, but then also what to do because of this Vena. And when the sages were carrying on their discussion in this way, they saw a dust storm arising from all directions. This storm was caused by the running of thieves and rogues who were engaged in plundering the citizens. So even he wasn't doing that end of the burning log. So what to do? They considered killing him, but they considered it was improper for them as Brahmanas to kill him. Thus, they did not attempt to stop the disturbance. Then they considered what's a rabbinical solution to this. And we have to do something, because if we don't do something, our Brahma Tejas, our spiritual strength, will be lost. Like a clay pot that has a crack in it, all the water leaks out. So we have to do something. And they were perplexed what to do. Text 42, the sages decided that the descendants of the family of the saintly King Anga should not be stopped, for in this family the semen was very powerful and the children were prone to become devotees of the Lord. But, there was this exception. Now, this is a very broad consideration. That is, performers of karma kanda that do have affinity for and recognition of the Supreme Lord. They're in this broad definition of devotees. They're devotees because they accept the Supreme Lord while they have a desire for fulfillment of material wants. So they're not undivided devotees. They're mixed devotees, and they're doing mixed things, but they have devotion to the Supreme Lord. So their consideration is from the line of Dhruva, who was a great devotee. And in his line, the kings have the capacity to produce devotees. So the family members of Anga shouldn't be killed. Excuse me. Yeah, he has been killed by their rabbinical utterances. I missed that part. After making a decision, the saintly persons and sages churned the thighs of the dead body of King Vena. Doesn't say how they did that. In case you want to know that, I don't know. Doesn't say. With great force and according to specific methods. As a result of this churning, a dwarf-like person was born from King Vena's body, and describes his features. And he was now carrying the badness, the inauspicious qualities of Vena. That was released from his body. And then the next chapter is they churn another part of Vena's body, and Prithu comes, an incarnation. Pretty far out way for an incarnation to come. Churning the body of a dead body, a dead person. So we're supposed to be discussing text number 20. That's the end of the chapter. Text 20. Yes? What's the time? I'm just going to read the translation. Text 20. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is worshipped by the great demigods, controllers of universal affairs. When he is satisfied, nothing is impossible to achieve For this reason, all the demigods, presiding deities of different planets, as well as the inhabitants of their planets, take great pleasure in offering all kinds of paraphernalia for his worship. Purport. All Vedic civilization is summarized in this verse. All living entities, either on this planet or on other planets, have to satisfy the Supreme Personality guided by their respective duties. When he is satisfied, all necessities of life are automatically supplied. Now, this is kind of a bypass of the Karma Kunda rituals. The bypass of the Karma Kunda rituals means you just worship the Personality of Godhead, serve the Personality of Godhead, offer everything to the Personality of Godhead. And in that way, the demigods are satisfied and all necessities are supplied by the demigods. You don't need to go to different demigods. For those that don't have that faith, they don't want to miss out on something, so they go to the Supreme Lord and this demigod, and the Supreme Lord and that demigod, and Supreme Lord and the other demigod, so they get their necessities because they don't have sufficient faith. And just worshiping the Supreme Lord takes care of everything. When he is satisfied, all necessities of life are automatically supplied. In the Vedas, it is also said, Kata Upanishad, Eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman, means from satisfying the one, Eka bahunam, from the one, the many become satisfied. Yo vidadati kaman, all the desires are fulfilled by worshiping the one. From the Vedas, we understand that he is supplying everyone's necessities, and we can actually see that the lower animals, the birds and the bees, have no business or profession, yet they are not dying for want of food. They're all living in nature's way. And they all have the necessities of life provided, namely eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Just yesterday, I saw this little creature. His body was about that big, and his tail was about as big as his body, and he had a really cute face. Had like a bandit's eyes, had a covering his eyes, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I smiled, and he smiled, and I said Harry Bowl, and he waved Harry Bowl, and he went on looking for food. And just was walking along the side of a fence, and nature was taking care of his necessities. He must have had a home. I think I saw him once before, but anyways, I was thinking, nature's taking care of him. He has a different way than we have, but nature's taking care of him. Human society, however, has artificially created a type of civilization which makes one forgetful of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Modern society even enables one to forget the Supreme Personality of Godhead's grace and mercy. Consequently, modern civilized man is always unhappy and in need of things. People do not know that the ultimate goal of life is to approach Lord Vishnu and satisfy him. They have taken this materialistic way of life as everything and have become captivated by materialistic activities. Indeed, their leaders are always encouraging them to follow this path, and the general populace, being ignorant of the laws of God, are following their blind leaders down the path of unhappiness. In order to rectify this world situation, all people should be trained in Krishna consciousness. This is what Prabhupada is doing in this purport. Discuss. And act in accordance with the Varnashram system. There we are again, the Varnashram system. The state should also see that the people are engaged in satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. the state, the government. And without good government, people do other stuff. And they're not satisfied, and they continue being not satisfied, acting out their frustrations and doing hurtful things to each other, and no solution. The Krishna consciousness movement was started to convince the general populace to adopt the best process by which to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus solve all problems. And the purport. So close your eyes and imagine you're a world acharya, and your mission is to save the world from unhappiness. How are you going to do that? And one of the things that's of a necessity to do that is the views of happiness that people have bought into. One, that world acharya needs to see what are the underpinnings of that conception of happiness that has holes in it, and point out the bucket has holes in it, and then supply the alternative bucket that doesn't have holes in it. We discussed this a little bit yesterday evening. Prabhupada said that one of the greatest obstacles that he found in spreading Krishna consciousness was the blind faith that people have in science. The blind faith that people have in science. So he was very busy poking at the holes in science. And this is another, the blind faith that people have in happiness through fruitive activities. Godless fruitive activities. Now, somewhere in there, there's a picture of godly fruitive activities, but a lot of what the godly fruitive activities are is not really godly. It's just unwholesome in many cases. Certainly there's exception, but in many cases, it's us against them. And us against them means unwholesome. It's, the pride position. We should be very careful and very wary. While having knowledge, we're being gifted with where the bucket has holes in it, but don't be proud. Be compassionate, because this was what Prabhupada is doing here. People should be happy. Sarve sukhino bhavantu. Everyone should be happy. Everyone should be happy. I'm listening to some lectures where Prabhupada is speaking at universities in America, and that's his message. At the beginning and certainly at the end, people should be happy. And the method to become happy is very simple. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. He makes it so simple, sound so simple. Try it. Even with all of that, sounding simple, etc., and even pointing to, the happiness and the transformation that has taken place in the lives of his followers, because he was very fond of pointing to his followers and saying how their lives have become so much changed in such a short period of time. And it's true. Therefore, it's very important for us to be good examples of followers, not just by externally being happy, but Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai, by recognizing what the real standard of happiness is and staying connected to that source of real happiness, just as we read, when he is satisfied. So that's bhakti, satisfying the Supreme. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam, satisfying the Supreme. That's the verse for this morning. Satisfying the Supreme. That's bhakti. That's the heart of the Vedas, satisfying the personality of Godhead. So when we're carrying that, then na sochati na kangsati, or brahmabhuta prasanatma, na sochati na kangsati. Neither hankering nor lamenting. Now that's a nice position. That's the position of a self-realized soul. Necessities are there. I don't need to hanker and I don't need to lament, because things are temporary. When they're taken, they're temporary. And they're gone. And they're here, they're temporary. They're taken, they're temporary. But we can use them, engage them, stuff in Krishna's service. Here's something that I recall Prabhupada saying multiple times, and I'll repeat it twice. It's connected to this verse. One of the principal primary duties of a spiritual master is to thoroughly instruct his disciples in the abject futility of finding happiness through fruitive activities. Because if you're not devoted to the Supreme, everyone wants happiness. So where does happiness come from? Happiness comes from stuff that you get through fruitive activities. So this is in the structure of the universe. This middle planetary region is a plane of passion. And that the objective of passion is find happiness. And how do you find happiness? Through working hard to get stuff so you can get happiness, because having stuff means happiness. It's not true, but it inspires fruitive activities to get stuff. And when is having enough stuff enough? Never enough. Endless. Passion burns and it keeps burning and burning. However much fuel you put in the fire, it just burns more. So how to get beyond that middle planetary region thing of happiness means getting stuff. And getting stuff is through fruitive activities. So intensely absorb yourself in fruitive activities, passion. How to elevate people above that? You have to poke holes in the conception that happiness means fruitive activities. It doesn't mean becoming lazy, but it means your objective should be higher. You work hard, but have a higher consciousness objective through your activities. Replace the lower with higher objectives in your activities. And strive for transcendence. And strive for transcendence requires descending mercy and so forth. Our necessities will be supplied. That's not our business. We do things so that necessities are there, that's for sure. But the maintainer is not our activities. It's the Supreme Lord. Here's a little story. One time I was attending a meeting in Mayapur, and after Mayapur, I got on a train in Calcutta and it was heading to visit a university, getting there by train. And something that I learned from traveling in trains in India is take rest early. When people are still, blabbing around, just lie down, take rest early, so I can get up early and chant my japa early before people get up. And chant morning peacefully. You take a bath in the place and make a big splash, but it's okay because it's going to dry in course of time and people come in. It's not all sloppy in the bathroom. So I got up, took rest early, got up early, chanted japa early, and I'm sitting there reading the Bhagavatam. And then the man across the way, this was a first class compartment, got up and the same routine, washed his face, brushed his teeth, came back, ordered tea. And then he looked at me, got his newspaper and looked at me. Businessman. So, do you need money? And I understood what he was saying. You're a parasite. You're living off of the hard labor of people like me. Then, I just smiled and said, all living entities are maintained by the Supreme Lord. Then he said, where do you get your money? I just drilled a little bit more. I said, from the same place you get yours, from the Supreme Lord. But you think that it's your hard labor that's bringing your money. And I think it's the Supreme Lord that's bringing your money and my money. And you're thinking I'm living off of your hard labor. And I'm thinking you're an illusion, thinking that it's your hard labor that's bringing your money. And he took his newspaper and flipped it up, and he didn't want to see my face. He said, That was the end of our conversation. Short and sweet. Whether somebody says it or not, the materialists think that way. And he was just bold enough to say it. Because, wearing a sannyas cloth, or, renunciate's cloth, I'm a parasite, making no contribution to the gross national product of the country, but living off of it. So materialists think such thoughts, and they may not be aggressive and hostile like that man, but they have their sense of what happiness is and how to get it. And that was just reading this purport. Read this purport again at your leisure, and with that lens. And Prabhupada is helping his audience, the world, to become accepting of the principle of bhakti by poking holes in that sense of what happiness is and how you get it. It's nourishing faith in transcendental life requires a degree of letting go, looking at and letting go of the illusory conception of what happiness is. Now, that's required in any circumstance when you're reaching out to audiences, or to an individual, because they're naturally holding on to a conception of what happiness is, because we want happiness. You have to have a conception of what happiness is and how to get it. It's an obstacle. So Prabhupada's a world preacher, a world acharya, addressing knowing that his Bhaktivedanta purports are going to be translated into many languages. And how is he going to address the world? Knowing that people are holding on very tightly to the material conception. So he's giving us some fundamental pointers to redirect our faith to the Supreme Person. And as he's, the opening part of this purport, all Vedic civilization is summarized in this verse, : all living entities, either on this planet or on the other planets, have to satisfy the Supreme Personality Godhead by their respective duties. So in the midst of storytelling, there's the narrative of the history of kings, but very kindly, Shukadeva Goswami and Srila Prabhupada, our commentator, are giving us a picture of transcendence. Even in the midst of history, even in the midst of Karmakanda stories, giving us a glimpse of what transcendence is, why necessities, how it is that necessities of life will be supplied by that path of transcendence. Don't worry about it. You can make practical arrangements, sure, but your main business is satisfying the Supreme Person, doing your prescribed duties in that consciousness. And that's a principle. Then there's the details of applying that principle. But that's what we do here in Houston, Texas. we try to understand how to apply these principles. Okay, so it's 20 after the hour. We'll stop and see if there's some discussion. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I do have just your story that you just told reminded me of a quote of Prabhupada, which I'd never quote properly, but a reporter asked him a similar thing, like, why are your students just living off society and not working and these kind of things? And he said, he gave an analogy of like a jailhouse and how the prisoners are breaking bricks.
Yeah.
And working hard to break those bricks, and the devotees are not breaking bricks. So it just reminded me of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's a little response to that explanation. Nelson Mandela for some time was put into prison. You're aware, right? And the prison was at an island. And his cellmate was an Indian man, and that's where Nelson Mandela learned about Bhagavad Gita from this Indian man who taught him Bhagavad Gita, not just the verses, but the meaning and the application of those verses. And the reason they were in jail is, they were opposed to the abuse of the government. So the government arrested them, and their business during the day, they'd go break bricks or stones into powder. And then at the end of the day, they throw the powder into the sea and they'll go back to their cell. And that's what they did for the period of time they're in jail. Break stones with hammers and throw the powder into the sea. Very humiliating. Purposeless brick breaking. Break their spirit. Mean them. Okay. Who's got the microphone? You do. Okay.
Hare Krishna. I was thinking about last chapter and this chapter, and I just keep coming back to this question of why did Anga marry the daughter of death?
There's no explanation of why he did.
Okay.
I mean, and the further question is, how does death personified have a daughter? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I was also confused about that because immediately I was thinking Yamaraj, but it's not Yamaraj because he's a devotee. And
well, it doesn't say she's the daughter of Yamaraj. She's the daughter of death personified. It's not that Yamaraj is death personified. He is the Lord of people who have done sinful activities, that he's predominating person. But it doesn't mean she was the son of Yamaraj. Or she was the daughter of Yamaraj.
yeah, I'm curious if there's more.
I don't have answers. Curiosity is good. You got to go to a source that has the answer. You have the answer? What's that? Could have what have been out of compassion? Marrying the. Well, marrying someone out of compassion isn't really an ideal of a good king. It's not the decision that kings make for marrying someone that's going to create a problem for his citizens. Because Anga, so I don't have an answer, but that doesn't an answer. Good kings select their wives or queens on other principles than compassion.
For power?
For power?
The power of death, he believed.
That was a bad choice if that was his reason. Yes.
Krishna Maharaj, this is related to what you were talking about another day. I hope that's okay.
Okay, fine.
I was speaking with a student yesterday on the campus.
Speak slow.
Sorry?
Speak a little slower.
I was speaking to a student
I got
at
it.
the University of Houston yesterday.
Oh, great.
and he was a philosophy major.
Hey,
So he kind of caught me off guard with his intelligence. And the subject of morality came up. He was saying that there's no objective morality. You can believe whatever you want. And I was saying that anyone would believe that killing somebody is wrong. But he brought up, well, what about an insane person, a very twisted person? They might feel that killing someone is actually pleasurable. And so I was wondering how would you speak to someone, and how would you come back
well,
to that comment?
I don't know if I don't know what your purpose is when you're on campus, if it's just having nice discussions. But if that's so, that's another topic. What your mission is when you're on campus speaking with students. But engaging with a philosophy person that says there's no absolute morality, it's totally subjective. And using this specific example of a mad person thinks it's happiness, that if the mad person thinks it's happiness, it doesn't mean it's dharma because he thinks it's happiness. It's just subjective. But so happiness in the mode of ignorance isn't happiness. Well, how can you make that statement? Because to him it's happiness. But that's not what morality is either. Just I'm happy, and so that's what morality is. So you can speak with reason, and you can speak with authority. The authority is Dharmam hi sakshat bhagavat pranitam. That's what it is, because it comes from this. The perfect person gives perfect morality, and that's absolute. But you don't accept that because you're a philosopher that says there isn't such an absolute authority. So let's just speak common sense. So let's speak common sense. I was asked the same question a number of years ago, and here's how he replied. The principle is that over time, the sense of what is morality shifts. And I gave the example to this. There was a young man. Somebody I know had the professional position. They were in charge of all the guidance, counseling divisions of all the public schools of the city of New York. How'd you like that job? And from time to time, they would have Board of Education meetings to have some fun. At one Board of Education meeting, they spoke about what it took to get kicked out of a classroom 10 years ago and what it takes to get kicked out of a classroom today. And 10 years ago, it was you speak without raising your hand, you're kicked out of the classroom. You talk back to the teacher, you're kicked out of the classroom. You throw a spit wad, you're kicked out of the classroom 10 years ago. And today, if you carry a concealed weapon, you're kicked out of the classroom. If you threaten the life of a teacher in the classroom, you're kicked out of the classroom. And if you have some physical altercation, you beat up on another student in the classroom, you're kicked out of the classroom. So the standard of discipline, the standards of what's right and wrong, shift through passage of time. And so having no standard, and to say there's no standard, then you're subjecting yourself to a constant drift that flows like a river and is flowing down. So it isn't that there is such a thing as the supreme person, and there is such a thing as a supreme person giving codes of conduct. Like there is such a thing as a state, and the state gives law, and the law is to be followed. You can't just go into your apartment and make up a law, and then that's law because you made up a law. You're subject to arrest because there is law. So there's laws of nature, and those laws of nature are infallible, and those laws of nature are given by the Supreme. And you can say no, and you're welcome to say no, and you're still subject to law. The law enforcement. No, whether he'll accept that or not, I don't know, but that's it. That's one reply.
Thank you.
Something over here. It's 8:28.
Comment on Prabhuji's question. I
Okay,
took an ethics class in college, and we actually do agree. It's called divine command theory.
divine
Command theory. And-
command theory.
Yeah. And
Sounds like here.
the message is, or the theory is that you believe something, it doesn't become right. There's a divine command or some like laws that exist by the divine like order, and those are what's right, and that's what you do, and that's what your nature is. It's not just what you suppose is your nature is.
It's not
right.
subjective, it's objective.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Or we're going to close up? Yes. You get the last question again.
Only one more comment on Prabhu's on his
Speak
question.
directly into the microphone because otherwise I won't be able to hear you.
Sometimes I find those questions very difficult because I feel like I know it is right, and then of
You
course,
feel that what?
I know what is right. Possibly, like I've trained myself, or I am training myself in order to live a moral way. But the way that I train myself is through chanting. And I read this right here above us. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. And I find that by chanting, I purify my mind and allow myself not to be confused by questions like that, but to just know in my
Speak
heart.
slower. Just the last part, not the whole thing.
By chanting,
Speak right into the microphone because it's hard to hear you. I'm straining. But
by
it doesn't-
chanting the holy name of the Lord, I purify my mind and allow myself to be guided.
So you have faith.
Exactly.
Great. Me too. Srila Prabhupada ki